Centro Astalli is formally an association of volunteers, and it's a very Italian combination somehow between a faith-based organization and an NGO. Jesuit Refugee Service is an activity of the Society of Jesus, of the Jesuits, and it was founded at the end of 1980. The idea was basically, the mission is to serve, to accompany and to advocate for forced migrants all over the world. Jesuit Refugee Service operates in 50 countries in the world, and with very different modalities, of course. Here in Rome, these activities was started by a group of lay volunteers. They were university students. And then somehow all the services developed exactly from here. This is the basement of the International College of the Jesuit, and this was the place that was given to this first small group of volunteers to serve refugees. And in fact, in 1981, they had to actually look for refugees because at the time it was not even formally possible in Italy to apply for asylum. So refugees were there, but under the protection of the United Nations, waiting for resettlement. So they had this first group of Ethiopians, and one of them painted, by the way, these paintings here. These paintings were made by one of the first refugees that in 1981 were assisted here. And at first it was very simple. It was sandwich distribution. Then a soup kitchen was created. Then from 1990, basically refugees arrived here to stay. So the first shelters were created, and at the moment we have any kind of service from the first arrival to the integration phase. We operate some, I would say, the most basic service in a collaboration with the authorities, with the local authorities. And in particular, our shelters, we have 4 shelters here in Rome and 2 fostering houses, are run within the national reception system for asylum seekers and refugees. So this means that we work in convention with them. They send us the people, we have to respect their standards, and we receive financial support for the service that we operate for them and with them somehow. This is quite a normal system in Italian welfare, complementary system from public and private. What else? The service that you have seen quickly here are basically, the idea is that this is the first point where people just arrive in town come, and they keep coming, in fact, as a point of reference. So we have the showers for people who sleep outdoors. We have soup kitchen. We have a first medical point that you can see here. Here we have our private health point with doctors who come as volunteers, but we have also a more systematic collaboration with the authorities, with the health service, with National Health Service, and it's a very interesting project, a permanent project that we run together with them in the seat of the National Health Service. We have a center called SAMIFO, which stands for Health for Forced Migrants. And there we have an interesting collaboration between doctors paid by the state and social workers paid by us, and they work together to offer full access to health service, as it is foreseen by the law, to asylum seekers in particular, and with a special focus on vulnerable migrants, of course. So psychiatric help, gynecologist unit, and one of my colleagues who works in this service, Giorgia Rocca, will join you on Friday, so you will maybe have the opportunity to share with her about that. We have legal accompaniment, of course, because for forced migrants it's very important to have legal information, legal support to follow all the very complex bureaucratic procedures that they have to submit. And Italian language classes. For most of our service, as I told you, we are an association of volunteers. This means that we have permanent staff, but also hundreds of volunteers who come to join us in the service. So you have seen here in the soup kitchen, imagine that every day we have a group of 6-7 people coming to help to cook and to serve and to clean afterwards. The same for Italian language classes. All the teachers are volunteers. And we just have the tutors and the coordinator of the service. And also in the shelters, of course, we have all the permanent staff, which is required and trained, but then we have groups of volunteers who offer additional activities, such as individual tutoring for the language, or activities for children, or a complement to medical care, and so on and so forth. Then we have an important service that we are investing quite a lot of energy in the last years that was born from the visit of the Pope that you can see portrayed there. 4 years ago, in September, 4 years ago, so exactly, I would say, 10th of September, to be precisely. It was quite an historical date for us. Pope Francis came to visit us here exactly during the soup kitchen, meeting all the refugees, the volunteers, and afterwards he met 400 refugees from all over Rome that we had summoned in the Church of Jesus. And in that occasion he gave a very powerful speech saying that religious congregation should not use empty convents to make money, to make hotels for pilgrims, but instead had to use these places for the refugees. So after this speech, we started receiving telephone calls from all the congregations. Imagine in Rome how many religious, I don't know if you can figure out how many different religious congregations are present in Rome, hundreds. And quite a bunch of them were quite serious in that. So we started planning together with that which could be their involvement. And the idea was not only to give a space, to create other place just like other, but to give sense to this engagement. And we thought that we wanted to create a program for people who were had already had a period in the reception centers, which for the state is 6 months after the recognition, so it's the duration of the procedure plus 6 months. But in Rome, honestly, after 6 months, even if maybe you start to learn the language or something, it's not so realistic that you have a job that you can rent a flat on your own after 6 months that you are here. So our target group for this specific project, which is called Community of Hospitality, is exactly people who have started the process of integration, maybe already have a little job or an internship or something, and need a little more time to consolidate this integration process, to save some money in order to become independent, or maybe to start living again with their families, because it's normal in Rome that in the first phase of reception, which can last more than 1 year, families are often separated. So women with children are put in a place and men in another place. So the idea is restoring normality in a way, daily routine. And in some of the flats or spaces that the congregation gave to us to manage with them, it was possible to give this possibility and at the same time to help them to establish social links with the neighborhood, which is the key for integration. So knowing the neighbors, go to school, meet someone, and religious congregation here in Rome often have a lot of relationship on the territory. So the idea is that their part is specifically to accompany one single refugee or one family, not no more than that, and to introduce them to the place where they are living. So in this program now, after 3 years from the beginning, we have 130 people in 28 different congregations here in Rome, and we are already at the 3rd year. So this means that most of the ones who entered now they are independent and they keep their contacts, but they live on their own. So it's quite a successful program. We started it also in Trento, because Centro Astalli operates not only in Rome, but also in Sicily, in Palermo and Catania, in northern Italy, in Trento and Vicenza. Different words. Italy, it's really different. One part from the other, it's completely another story, another social context, another relation with institution, another society also. So it's also a challenge and interesting to see how to better operate in the different contexts. And finally, we have a part of our work, which is quite a major part of our work, which is awareness raising. Because we are convinced that an emergency is also to give to the Italian society the tools to understand who refugees are and to be ready to integrate them, because it's not enough to invest only to find jobs or to find flats if refugees keep being completely isolated or even meet hostility of the population. This process will never end. And so it's already 17 years that we have programs in schools, in middle and high schools. We have two different programs which are for free for the school and for the students. We bring refugees to meet students, class by class, in little group. We have developed a lot of didactic material that teachers may use to, and it's really a world of opportunities for the students. Imagine that we meet every year 24,000 students in two programs. One is the one specifically about refugees, and starting from 2002, we decided to start another program which is similar in a way about religious identity, prevention of Islamophobia, but also in general awareness of different religious identity. And we have a team of different people, really very different one from the other, from all the possible faiths who are present here. So Jewish, Muslim, Hinduist, Sikh, whatever we manage. And the idea is to help them to meet the students, to answer to their question, even the most stupid question, possibly, and then to bring the class to visit one place of worship, but not a monument, a place where the community in fact gathers, and possibly near their class, near their school. So to help them to see also their classmates, sometimes with different eyes, and to have more opportunity for mutual understanding. So this is a huge work that we do. And then, of course, we have the ordinary, we are in the different network for advocacy and lobbying, and so we study the developments of the laws and so on and so forth. But this is more boring to describe, probably. So this is a general picture. So I imagine you are probably curious to ask something.
I'll ask a question.
Yeah.
Is there, I know it's very different circumstances, but people arrive and you said it takes about a year maybe to get them maybe on to the next step. How does that step happen? What might it be? Do you help them find placements or work or housing, or how do they get into Italian society?
Well, let's imagine a good situation, because one thing to say is that one issue, one problem here in Italy is that often the possibility and the opportunities are not equal. Yeah. So it depends very much where you are, who you meet. It's a bit unsystematic. Yeah. In the recent year, some improvement have been made, but let's imagine a standard situation. A standard situation means that someone arrives by boat, let's say it's rescued by boat, let's say it will happen again, because now we have an issue also there, but let's pretend that everything is fine. He is rescued, he is brought to an harbor in southern Italy. After the first identification, refugees are sent to different Italian regions quite equally. They are distributed for forced reception. So imagine that a group of them arrives to this region, Lazio, and is sent to a center which is called normally CASE, the Forced Reception Center. In this place, normally there are big places where people stay for the length of their procedure, asylum procedure. This means, let's say, 10 months as an average. Here is the first challenge, because they should be offered exactly in that moment any kind of support. This is the moment where they are the most vulnerable, because maybe they have special needs, maybe they need information, they should be legally supported. And this typology of center, in fact, is not offering very high standards. So it happens that a lot of people who access our service are, in fact, in this phase, and they don't receive the support by the center, but they find it somewhere. After that period, if they are lucky enough, they can be sent to this ordinary system, which is like the centers that we have. It is called the SPRAR, System for Protection of Asylum Seekers and Refugees, and in that kind of center the standards are much higher. And the idea is that for each one, imagine that the centers normally are no more than 30 places, often much less. And there is a whole team working on that, of caseworkers, of specialists, and the idea is that each guest has an individual program, somehow with goals for integration. The period that the state pays for is 6 months after the recognition, so the whole length of the procedure plus 6 months. In this 6 months, the idea is that depending from, because of course it may seem quite obvious to say, but each person is different. They are really different from age, background, so according to that, you start doing this step. Of course, language is...
I was going to ask that question about language,
exactly.
Learning indigenous language of Italian. Learning that in the space of a year and a half would be quite a challenge.
This depends very much. Our program of language is, we feel it's very important, so we offer lesson every day for free, for 2 hours per day, with volunteers in class groups. But here we have a special challenge in Rome and in Lazio that the state programs are not so good. I mean, they are not for everybody. In theory, this offer should be made first by the institutions, and in fact, it's not so much like that. So we have a lot of organizations like us providing free additional service for language.
I come from a geography background, and I've studied, my doctorate was actually in immigration, so I find this quite fascinating, contrasting what happens in Ireland and what happens here in Italy. And regarding nationalities, what nationalities do you have primarily? And once people arrive here on the coastline of Italy, you said each region gets an equal number. Are special circumstances taken to keep friends, family together? And also, would you keep distinct ethnic groups or nationalities together, or what is the policy there? I'm sorry.
No, I mean,
1 hour.
Very good questions, but let's try to do so. Main nationalities. Main nationalities, of course, in our service here in Rome depends from the service, because of course soup kitchen is more in line with the nationalities of forced arrivals, while for example someone who is doing a vocational course and probably it's already 3 years that it's here, the nationalities in that service are probably different, and also there are factors of course that have an impact on the service. So for example, in the medical service we obviously have a prevalence of some nationalities where we have more translators or staff workers of the same nationality. This is quite normal, even if we try to vary a little bit. In general, nationalities here in Italy asking for applying for protection are, there is a big group from West Africa. West Africa means Nigeria, Ivory Coast, Ghana, Gambia, but also Mauritania, Mali. So we have a big group of them. Traditionally, we have also a quite big group from the Horn of Africa. Okay. So that means Somalia, Eritrea, and used to be Ethiopia, not so much anymore. Eritreans are going down a lot in the arrivals for different factors that I'm not going to analyze here. Okay, we still have that. We have almost nothing more from Afghanistan, but for a very technical reason, because they are blocked in Greece, so they don't arrive anymore, or in Turkey, and sent back to Afghanistan. And we have some Middle East, so not so many Syrians for
job reasons, yeah.
No, for the fact that the way people arrive to Europe are very much impacted by the policy of European Union at the borders. So it's long to explain, but yes, we have some arriving with the humanitarian corridors, or some arriving in general, but not a prevalence, while we started having quite a lot from Iraq, and again from Turkey, Kurds from Turkey, which was not the case for many years, but now again, obvious reasons. Then of course in Rome in particular, there is also a percentage of people sent back from other European countries, and this percentage is of course going up with very, very vulnerable cases. Pregnant women, old person, sick person, and especially from Switzerland, they are very, very zealot in sending back. So it's going up. But also this has a political explanation, but we will not get into these details. Now, the distribution. The distribution was already a big step forward, because this was not the case before. After 2013, the number of people arriving by sea went up a lot. So now they are going down again, because we are trying to close the route, but basically it went up a lot, especially because systematic search and rescue in the Mediterranean was started. So from the usual, let's say, 20,000, we are to an usual 150, 180, which is a lot. By the way, we have, in a global context, is nothing. I mean, we have in Iraq, my colleagues had 1 million arriving in a weekend, so everything is relative, you see. But let's say it's a lot. Because as you probably are aware, in Europe, we receive less than 3% of the refugees all over the world, and we are the first economy. So just to make this clarification. The distribution, well, yes and no. It's not done on the basis of nationalities, of course. It's done in order of arrival. There are issues on keeping families together. Now and then we have issues about minors. Now and then we have issues about minors that parents that declare that minors is there, but someone comes so that you have to demonstrate it, so to pay for DNA or crazy thing like that to access the asylum procedure. So we have seen everything in these last 3 years. Anyway, I would say that in general, till a few months ago, normally, at least when you arrived and applied for asylum, in a way, you got a roof somewhere, which was not the case before. Now the situation is changing again, because now the issue is accessing the procedure. So more and more people are excluded from that, and so we have other things coming, let's say. But if it's better to keep the nationalities, not the nationality, this is a long story. It's a fact that in Italy, for forced migration, but also for migration in general, we have a huge variety of nationalities, for the good and for the bad. The good side is that we don't have prevalent nationalities who develop a parallel system somehow. Imagine Turks in Berlin, there are places in town where you don't hear a word in German. This is not the case in Italy, it will never be the case, because we have hundreds of nationalities of origin, not only of forced migrants, but also of migrants in general. So we don't have this problem. The bad, the challenge is that it's much more complicated to teach the language, because of course you cannot count on the support of a community, you cannot count on specific tools developed for that specific group, and so it's all like, we try, we try to see what happens. So somehow it's true that foreign people are more encouraged to use Italian as a vehicular language with others, for example, which is not the case elsewhere. On the other side, it's also true that the fact, especially for refugees, I would say, that they cannot count on an organized community leaves them very, very vulnerable. So everything happens, they are back again at the starting point. So we have every day people who maybe had a success story of integration in northern Italy, and then they lose their job, or they have an illnesses or anything, an accident or anything, and they cannot rely on family, on social network. Well, in this country, everything is built like that. All the welfare assumes that you have a family to look after you. So the support that you are offered is more support to members of your family to care for you. But if you don't have a family, you have a problem, honestly. And this is exactly the case for many refugees. And this is why we really feel that establishing social links, establishing friendship on an equal level, not only as users of a service, it's really a key point for also for sustainability, because you invest a lot and you can lose everything in 5 minutes somehow. So it's quite fragile, the integration process that you are doing. So to go back to your question, you learn the language better or with more difficulties, depending also on who you are. I've seen people from Afghanistan arriving here, 19-year-old, never went to school, nevertheless in 2 years they have a degree from Italian school and driving license, because literally they wanted it. Of course, if you are a Somali housekeeper, housewife, 46-year-old, it's very complicated. You are illiterate, you are not somehow in the mood of saying that this is meaningful for you, to learn a language or to find a job. So it depends very much on who you are. And the paradox is that sometimes the more qualified you are, the harder it is. Because I remember maybe I also mentioned it to Sergio, I don't remember. I remember a woman from Congo who was a judge in her country. And she arrived here, she learned quite fast the language, she was a French speaker, very educated. She went to the service, the municipality service for finding jobs. And she was asked, which is your job experience? And she started saying everything, and the answer of the class was, okay, so nothing. Because of course it's nothing that can be used here. But imagine the impact of this affirmation when, I mean, this woman was tortured because of the fact that she was a judge. And so really it's a struggle. So sometimes you are not used to you don't recognize yourself in that position, for example. University teachers or people who were used to very high standards of living, much higher than the one we have, and they really literally cannot recognize themselves in someone queuing for food or accepting any kind of job, or sometimes they are not even able to do that kind of job because it never occurred to them to clean their house because they had slaves to do that. Also that happened. And so it's complex. It's complex because there is not a single answer for everybody. There are models, there are standards, but nevertheless it's quite evident, everyone working here, including volunteers, you really see one person is very different from the other. It's very complicated also to say in general people from Afghanistan. It's not in general, it's specific one by one.
Do you give support and training to your volunteers because they're seeing people in a very different situation from what they're used to.
No, yes, of course. So we organize a general training, yes, once per year. There are 3 or 4 big occasions for general issues. But then, of course, someone who wants to volunteer here has a first interview, and then when he or she is placed in a service, in that service they organize specific training and if appropriate also supervision or initiatives that it's somehow local, depending. For example, the teachers, Italian teachers are, yes, of course, have many opportunities to be trained, also together with others, because we are in a network of organizations who teach Italian as a foreign language to migrants. And so in this way we are able also to pay for trainers that may become a specific thing. Now they are doing a program about alphabetization, about illiteracy, how to address illiteracy in migrants or enforced migrants according to their age. And so yes, they have some specific training, they have individual support, and they have general training.
You're given the individual support.
Yes, the individual support, yes. There is a Jesuit who is also the assistant director, who is the one somehow is there for the volunteers, who makes the first interviews and also somehow follow up with the services.
What factors you motivate people or volunteers to work here?
Sorry?
What factors can motivate people to come and work here as volunteer?
Ah, that's a great question.
Volunteers.
We always had a lot, I would say, and now we have even more than usual, of course, because in this moment the society is very polarized. Or you are very much against, or you are very much for, somehow. The discussion on refugees, of course, migrants, it's everywhere, on media and so on. So the group of volunteers we have here is really very different for age, background, everything. They are not all religious. This is the first thing that I would like to underline. Yes, we are a faith-based organization, but not even the staff is required to be Catholic, of course. So imagine the volunteers. We have literally everything, every religion, every opinion, every philosophy. What brings people here, I would say in general, is the passion for the cause in itself. So we have teachers, we have doctors, we have retired people, quite a lot. We have students who are studying these issues and want to practice. We have members of religious congregation, but really any kind of different people that develop an interest for the issue for one reason or another. I would say that it's this number of people applying in the last years is growing quite a lot. And also interesting, it's also that we have some students that in high school have met a refugee with us, and so when they turn 18 they want to serve here. We have civil service also, which is a program for young people from 18 to 29. They can serve 1 year in a place getting some money from the state. And this service is very interesting because it's open also to migrants. And so the group of about 10 people that we have every year is a mixed group, and there are also refugees doing this together with Italian people. So we have refugees who are in our reception centers, or they are not anymore in our reception center, who come here to volunteer. Some of them are involved in the program for schools to tell their story and to support us in awareness raising in public occasion. So, depending. There are some who are here till 1981, some ladies that started with the center. Yeah.
How do you fund the organisation? Are you very reliant on the Jesuit order? For
No, not so much. Unfortunately, we would like to. No, I'm joking because this is part of my job, funding. I would say that at the moment we have 1/3 of public funding for the conventions that I mentioned before, 1/3 of donors, and this 1/3 includes also the Society of Jesus, also the Italian Conference of Bishops, but also a lot of private small donors. We have typically the envelope for Christmas, and this is quite a part of our culture, I would say. And the last third is finance projects. So we submit application for specific programs or things. So this is, in a way, our budget is about 3 million euro per year, so it's quite a lot. And we don't have someone to pay our bills. We have also to find the balance with the resource. So yes, we have donation from the Society of Jesus, but not so important as you may imagine.
And as you look ahead, is that balance likely to change as you look ahead?
Yeah. Probably yes. We are thinking about that. We are experiencing some issues in public funding, even if we really, it's really our method to work with the institutions. We really would like to keep it to this collaboration, because as I told for the medical center, it's much easier, of course, to have your doctors, your things, and you do whatever you want. It's more complex to work together with the public institution, with all the shortage that we know, but we think that has more impact if you manage somehow to change, to contribute to change the ordinary system and to become not necessary anymore. So, nevertheless, it is a challenge to rely on public funding, especially here in Rome in this moment, I would say. Funding opportunities, who knows? I mean, sometimes, more or less, for the moment, they are stable. The opportunities in the last years, we will see. Of course, we are not in the position as, for example, NSF or other organization to say we use only our private funding, we refuse any funding from the state. No, I mean, I see the point, sometimes I see the point even more, but no, we are definitely not in the position to do that if we want to provide, as it's our style, a permanent service. Our services are not projects. They are service. When we open the soup kitchen, we open it. Even if we don't have funding, we keep it open. It's not that we do a project for 1 year for 50 people. If we start engaging in something because it's a priority, we start and then we find the way. So it's not very strategic if you want, but this is the way we do it. And so it depends. Private donation, more or less, even went a little down in the years of the crisis, but somehow the picture is quite stable in the last few years. But of course, looking ahead is not a wonderful moment.
And do you have many paid staff here?
We have many?
Paid staff.
Paid staff, yes, that's our weak point, I would say, because in order to have the service like a reception center, you have the standards, and the standards require permanent and trained staff with specific qualifications. So yes, in Rome we have 49. So it's quite a lot. We work a lot. I mean, we cover a lot of things. In a normal organization, you would need 80 probably, but nevertheless, and we are really paid the minimum, which is possible by law, I would say honestly. But nevertheless, the costs for the staff are quite high. Other costs are incredibly low, and so I mean, the indirect cost, we save a lot in other expenses. We don't invest much even in communication or in other things. Nevertheless, yes, the staff is an important cost, I would say.
Do you consider developing activities that will generate income?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Not exactly employing one of your beneficiaries, but
no, we did it in the past.
Maybe intermediating their employment, and by this getting some money from the people who want to employ and don't find workforce.
No, this second thing is not very realistic in this moment in Italy, I would say. We organize internships which are for free for the employer, and even in that case, they are not especially grateful. They feel they are doing a favor. What we tried in the past was to build a cooperative for laundry. We had a laundry here, and somehow the good thing is that it goes on and it offers service, for example, not only to our reception centers but to hotels or other reception centers in Rome. But honestly, the form of the cooperative was not working very well, because it was not possible, as it was the project, to have people rotating somehow, doing it for a while, and then it was a kind of nightmare. So what we have now is that this laundry is a part of our organization. So it's, there is the possibility, according to the law, to have a percentage somehow of the activities which is profit in a way. It's not incredibly profiting, but it exists. We still have it. But I would not say that it's the most successful experiment we have ever done. I mean, it exists, but who knows in the future. Yes, of course, we should explore something like that.
We also had a project about refugee integration, and we found the main issues in our countries. It was lack of motivation to learn language when it is used only in one country, for example, Lithuania, Latvia, or Estonia, and also motivation to stay in these countries. They want to go to Germany. What is about this situation?
I would say Italy, we are in between. To be very honest, it depends very much on the refugees, because there is and always will be quite a large group of refugees who could never afford to go to Germany. So somehow they are in it. They arrive and they stay here. Syrians, Eritreans, others, of course, have more ideas of going. Nevertheless, it's becoming so complicated that I don't know. Of course, there is a quite large part who considers themselves in transit. And then, in fact, they don't transit anymore. It's almost 1 year that all the borders are closed. But the fact that they consider themselves in transit is, of course, a big challenge for their integration. We met people who tried 5, 6, 7 times to go in Northern Europe, were sent back, and nevertheless tried again. And in this span of time of 10 years, they are exactly at the same starting point when they arrived. It's a nightmare. In Rome, this happens combined with the phenomenon of occupied buildings and squats, because of course in this process people leave their right to be settled, and at that point they gather together with the other members of their community in these big spots, one of which was dismantled just in August, and it was, yes, really a very tough moment, because imagine more than 400 people, Eritreans, moved by force in the street. Yes, it was quite a terrible moment, because there are people with no other options in a way, and it's not only because they want to go elsewhere. It's also because sometimes they are, after a while, they have to leave the center, and they are left with no effective tools for integration. Nevertheless, integration is the biggest challenge. Now, I would say that I have the sense that our government is starting addressing this issue. This would be something quite new. I would say that the political moment is in favor of that, because the message, more or less, that it's passing is once we stop these arrivals, then we can start something serious on integration. Our position is, of course, nothing prevented you from doing something serious even before, but okay. That's it, that's where we live, and so we will see. Now the government announced in a couple of weeks, I think, the publication of this integration plan, which we are waiting for at least 4 years, I would say. We will see what happens.
And also, maybe you know what is percentage of negative and positive answers?
Yeah, it's going to happen. It used to be 60 positive, 40 negative. Then it became the opposite. Now it's more 60 negative, 40 positive. But this is an average because the different, we have 50 commissions scattered all over the country, and they are really very different. Now there is a big reform of this system going on. They will change completely all the system, and at the end of September probably a new law will be published about that. So the idea is to reform completely the system of the Commission and to have more standards procedure and new people paid directly by the ministry and not all this representative of different things, and to have professional staff to do that. My idea is that most probably the trend in Europe is to have more negative than positive. In Italy we still have this kind of escape, which is we have a form of permit to stay, which is used in Italy, that in case of negative answer, in case you are not granted a status of protection, there is still the possibility of issuing a permit to stay on humanitarian grounds. Which is very important because can be converted in a permit for job. So now we will see. Europe is criticizing a lot the use of this permit, but from the other side it's the only reasonable thing to do, because it also makes no sense that you have had for 1 year and a half someone in Italy and trained him, and probably maybe he also got a job, and then you say no, you have to be removed. So why spending on that while you could just have him keep paying taxes and working on the territory? So there is something, a kind of movement of petition of changing the migration law in general, and one aspect is this, for example, more flexibility in the use of this humanitarian permit. It was already done in Torino for a group of denied asylum seekers. All the employers have written a letter to the police saying these people are working, we need them, they are good at their job, so please do something, and in fact they decided to release this humanitarian permit to them. This was an encouraging precedent, I would say. Who knows?
I have another question for you.
Yeah.
In regards to the Board of Governors, the management committee of your organisation, is there many immigrant voices on that committee? Is there actually members of, is there actually refugees or former refugees who actually sit in that committee? To help?
Which committee, sorry?
Your Board of Governors?
Ah, our Board of Governors. Let's say not in Rome. We have staff members, of course, who are refugees or former refugees, more refugees than former refugees. Celebrated the only one citizenship granted to one of my colleagues just a few months ago after 17 years. Okay.
Yeah, it does. I didn't realise. I would have expected. In Ireland, we have a very quick process of where you can become naturalised after so many years if you're a refugee.
No,
so that's why I was saying
it takes an eternity, even if you are a refugee. Because the trick is that if you are a refugee, you can apply after 5 years and not after 10.
Yeah.
But it takes anyway 10 years to get the answer at least, and there is no term at all. So we had coordinators of Trento, of other towns who were refugees, not in this moment, but in general. No, the board is very little, honestly. He knows probably better than me because I don't remember. But I think there are 3-4 people from the Society of Jesus and from an economic advisor. It's a very small board compared to the dimension of the organization. So no, I would say no refugees there over the moment, no women there for the moment, I would also stress. But we are still Jesuit managed.
I remember I was impressed during the interview about the work you've done in the school, about the communication. Can you tell us something about
this? So, Bernadette will come on Friday. Bernadette is my colleague who works on the program for interfaith dialogue in school. So, you will have the opportunity also of meeting her, and she will probably vividly describe this kind of engagement. No, it's a very interesting program, I would say. It's very time-consuming, quite costly, also not financed normally, but it's really enriching somehow. The funny thing is that we don't do any publicity of the program because we don't manage to cover all the requests already. Nevertheless, every year we have more because teachers talk one to the other. One very interesting thing about that is that we tried to build a kind of full program, so not only a spot occasion, just meet a refugee and that's it, but to create different moments in the year. For example, all the students are invited to take part to a competition, writing short stories on the issue of the project. We have two different ones, one for middle school and one for high school, and during the summer we have several juries to read all these short stories. And just yesterday we had the one for high school, but with writers, journalists. It's quite a high-level jury. And in October we had this big event for 900 students all over Italy coming for this prize and also to launch the new year. And the prize for the best short story is normally the realization of a material that can be used in school the next year. So we did last year a graphic novel, this year will be a video clip with an actor acting the story. So the idea is also to involve the student themselves and to be them the ones who speak to other students about their experience. And the other interesting aspect I would say of this project is that we involve refugees as the one teaching something. I mean, they are the one in the position of the educator, of the teacher. They tell about their experience, they tell about their country of origin, and so they are seen in a different position, not the one who takes, but the one who gives. And this is very important, and for the students it's particularly striking when the age of the refugee is near to their age, and this also happens because some of them are very young. And so I would say that the impact of this project is very important and somehow encouraging. It's also true that it was easier when nobody was talking about refugees. When I started this work 17 years ago, the average Italian person never heard a word about refugees, including myself. Now it's all in every newspaper, in every TV show, and it's, I would say it's not a fair competition. we really see the impact of all this narrative about that. And now with the election, as usual, approaching, because now they approach every 3 months, you see a kind of escalation of this narrative about fear, about invasion, about terrorism, and so on and so forth.